I'm Father Joseph Kikuchi. I'm here in August of 2008 with my dear friend Ann Rice, author of Christ the Lord Out of Egypt, Christ the Lord, The Road to Cana, and most recently, Called Out of Darkness, A Spiritual Confession. Ann, it's good to be with you.
Thank you. I love being with you, Father.
Thank you, likewise. We've been speaking recently about the great wealth of sensory input that the Catholic Church has used from the beginning to bring our spirits closer to the God that is not available to the senses. And I want to speak a little bit about hearing as a sense today. The Church always prefers that at Mass, for instance, we hear the Word of God proclaimed rather
Right.
than read it through a missalette,
Right.
because through the ears into the soul, metaphorically anyway. You mentioned in your memoir that your early concept of God came through the spoken words of your mother.
That's right.
What do you remember from that?
Oh my gosh, she was the great teacher of my life, and that really continued well after I went to school. My mother was just a Catholic through and through, and she knew her religion and she loved it. She was devoted to it, and there wasn't any question she couldn't answer. And she was great at telling us about the lives of the saints and the things that they had done. And she just lived and breathed her faith. There was no question of it. And when she would take us to church, she would point everything out, all the beautiful things. She would point the statues out. She would encourage us to pick little flowers along the way. When we were little children, we'd be walking to the chapel to pray or to the church to pray, and we'd pick the flowers that burst out of the fence, the ones that nobody minded you picking, the plumbago, the lantana, the little inexpensive flowers. We didn't pick the expensive roses and the camellias in the garden district, but we'd make little bouquets of these flowers. And when we would get to church, we would go up to the communion rail and we would kneel down and we would put our flowers there. And she would always assure us that somebody came later and put our flowers with the statues of the Blessed Mary, Blessed Virgin Mary, and the saints. And of course now I know that wasn't true. But still, it was our little offering, and we left it on the communion rail. And I hope that when the sacristan, Mr. Charlie, found our little flowers, maybe he was touched.
Sure. I'm sure the Lord was pleased, certainly. Yeah. What
I
a
hope
wonderful
so.
little act of devotion.
Yeah.
They say that parents, in so many ways, give children their first sense of what God is like. We look at our parents and
Yeah.
we assume God must be like this. You mentioned in the memoir that your parents were trying to raise 4 little geniuses.
Well, my mother, that was her bright idea, that she wanted 4 perfectly healthy children and 4 geniuses.
Mm-hmm.
And she believed in spending a lot of time with us. You know, she was not a homeschooler. There wasn't such a thing in those days as a homeschooler, and we went to Catholic school besides. But she certainly homeschooled us in the off hours. And she did a lot of reading to us of poetry. And all of us children remember this particular book of poetry that she used to read from that I mentioned in my memoir. The name escapes me now, but I think it's Poems for Boys and Girls. And we've gotten copies of it. We've gone on Amazon.com and we've gathered up used copies of this book because we love it so much and we love the poems that were in that book. And she read those poems to us. She said because she wanted us to have a sense of rhythm. And I think it worked. I think that if somebody were to study my writing, all of the 29 books or 30 books or however many I've written, and study that little book of poems, they'd probably see that almost all of it derives in some way from those particular poems.
It was a great formative childhood.
It was a wonderful childhood in many, many ways. And my mother was great at pointing out the beauty that was around us in New Orleans. She was great at pointing out beautiful things to us. She didn't let things escape our notice. She would take us to the park and take us to the most beautiful part of Ottoman Park, which was the front part where the fountains were. And we would sit on the grass there and drink orange juice that she brought with her in a jar. And it was only later that we discovered the merry-go-round and the zoo and the various things. But I remember those early visits to the park and all those beautiful flower beds and fountains in the front of Ottoman Park. I remember that and the beauty of the campus of Loyola University across the street with the beautiful cloister. It was all part of the beauty that she introduced us to.